Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to this afternoon's session where you're going to learn a little bit more about beef and the cattle industry and some of the research that's going on here at the University of Saskatchewan. I'd also like to mention that it's a great day to celebrate Agriculture Day today. Today is Canada's Ag Day, or Canada's Agriculture Day, and there's numerous different things taking place from coast to coast, and we're excited to have you taking part here in the great province of Saskatchewan. I want to introduce myself. My name is Clinton Monchuk. I am the Executive Director of Farm and Food Care Saskatchewan. I also farm in the Lanigan area with my brother Andrew, where we have a grain and egg farm as well. I'd like to start things off by just not only welcome everybody to this, but also say that just to kind of get everybody interested in the comment section and know where everybody's from. If you want to take just a couple minutes and indicate which town you're calling in from, or if you're a classroom, just indicate the school that you're calling in from, the classroom, the grade, as well as how many kids are in your class. We do already have some things posted for teachers in the comments section, including a summary of the tour, as well as a viewing guide as well. We do have a variety of different resources that you can look at after this webinar too via our website, farmfoodcaresk.org, as well as our national initiative, which is canadianfoodfocus.org, and you can see that going along the bottom of your page. Today we have two great experts in their fields on the call that are going to explain a little bit more about beef production and the research that's happening at the Livestock and Forage Center of Excellence here at the University of Saskatchewan. Our first guest is Lana Haight, who is the Research and Engagement Specialist at the Livestock and Forage Center of Excellence. Lana's background is in journalism, and she absolutely loves asking questions. Currently, she interviews and writes stories about U of S scientists who conduct research to improve health and welfare of beef cattle, and Lana and her husband currently live just southeast of Saskatoon. Our second guest is Dr. Colin Palmer, who's a veterinarian and associate professor at the Western College of Veterinary Medicine, and he also conducts different projects at the Livestock and Forage Center of Excellence. He and his family operate a cattle ranch under the name KC Cattle Company, and Dr. Palmer is the author of more than 100 different articles and has presented in more than 60 different conferences and seminars. So thank you very much to both of you for taking your time out of your day to be with us today.
Glad to be here.
Excellent. So to start things off, Lana's actually given a little bit of an overview of the Livestock and Forage Center of Excellence with a pre-recorded video that kind of highlights some of the different things within the center. What we're going to do, just so you understand a little bit more of the procedure, we'll see the video, I'll ask them a couple questions, and then we're going to open it up to questions from the audience. And I really want to put a shout out to the classrooms out there to get engaged with this and have your students ask some questions. So with that, I want to turn it over to Angela to play the video.
Welcome to the University of Saskatchewan's Livestock and Forage Center of Excellence. My name is Lana Haight. I'm the Outreach and Engagement Specialist at the center. So we're just a few minutes south of Clavet right now. We're about a half-hour drive from the University of Saskatchewan's main campus in Saskatoon, southeast of the city. So what we have done here is we have brought under one roof the feedlot. We now have a 1,500 head feedlot, and we have a cow-calf herd that this spring will be calving about 400 animals. In addition, we also have forage research that's happening here at the Livestock and Forage Center of Excellence. We have about 49 quarters of land that is owned, leased, and rented by the University of Saskatchewan. In many ways, this facility is the most comprehensive research facility of its kind in Canada and perhaps around the world. One of the most exciting things about this center is how we have also brought together under one roof researchers from a variety of disciplines. We have scientists from the colleges of agriculture and bioresources, engineering, arts and science, as well as the Western College of Veterinary Medicine. These scientists are doing a whole range of research, from under the ground, looking at environmental aspects of terms of water and how it moves in the ground, soil and how the soil is impacted by cattle feedlots as well as cow-calf operations. We also have a lot of feed studies being conducted here in the feedlot. Many of those studies happen in those small pens that we've already seen. But these pens behind me are actually large pens. They're more similar in size to what you would see in an actual feedlot. And it's in these pens that the scientists from the Western College of Veterinary Medicine are particularly interested in disease transfer and animal behavior and those kinds of things. The metabolism barn is a specialized laboratory. Each animal is its own research unit. And so scientists can measure with incredible precision everything that goes into the animal and everything that goes out of the animal. We follow here in the Metabolism Barn and elsewhere at all of the facilities of the Livestock and Forage Centre of Excellence, the guidelines set out by the Canadian Council for Animal Care. So these animals are the first calf heifers that belong to the Livestock and Forage Centre of Excellence. We also have bred cows that are in 2 different pastures. Closer to calving season, these animals, as well as the cows, will be moved to the main yard of the Forage Cow-Calf Research and Teaching Unit, where they'll calve in the calving pens that are outside. However, sometimes an animal will need a little bit of support, whether that's the cow that's calving, or perhaps if it's really cold, the calf is going to need to be kept warm. And for that, we actually have our indoor pens.
Okay, now we're going to take our actual gas sample. This pot's been sitting on here for 20 minutes. We're going to measure the nitrous oxide, the methane, and the CO2 coming off the soil here. Okay, let that ride for about 10 seconds. Okay, that's my tube there. And there we go. Let's go. That's okay. Plunger's going down. That means we have an evacuated tube. Just going to finish the plunge there. Boom. Done. Okay.
As we head back towards Saskatoon, we're stopping at Goodale. This particular facility is called the Specialized Livestock Facility. And livestock at the Livestock and Forage Centre of Excellence includes more than beef cattle. Here we have bison. We actually have 2 bison herds at the Livestock and Forage Centre of Excellence. And the researchers at the University of Saskatchewan access these bison to do research on reproductive technologies as well as disease management. Thank you for coming on our tour today. I hope you've seen how we have truly brought together under one roof pre-existing research facilities in Saskatchewan in order to provide innovative and excellent resources for scientists to do fabulous work on behalf of the forage and livestock industries in our province. We've also brought together under one roof academia, government, and industry. And then finally, we've brought together under one roof a whole range of scientists looking at under the soil, water, the soil itself, looking at forage and crops, looking at cow-calf and the feedlot and beyond. So we really do look forward to seeing you in person. Please come and see us at the Livestock and Forage Centre of Excellence for your in-person tour when we're finally able to get together again.
I love the fact that Lana brought props out to the video and had that cat coming in as you were talking. So
a very cute kitty. I wished I had picked it up and maybe cuddled it a little bit. I was trying to ignore it, but maybe I shouldn't have.
It was pretty cute, pretty cute. Lana, and it's good that you actually had the opportunity to do that before it got really cold outside too, because it was done back in January. So it was good to see that you weren't freezing while you were doing that. I did want to start with you, Lana, on this and just to kind of maybe explain a little bit why some of this stuff is needed and why the University of Saskatchewan kind of made the decision to do this and the kind of the betterment for the cattle industry here in this province and the university.
I think, Clinton, producers are looking for ways to improve their operations. It's just natural. We all know that we can get better at things that we do. And so it's not surprising that cattle producers and ranchers are also wanting to find ways where they can improve their operation, do a better job looking after animals, do a better job of looking after the environment, and do a better job of looking after their families. This is their job after all. And so they need to make money in order to continue this as their business. But the other group that I think also is looking for answers, it's people like you and me and the people on this call who are eating food, and we want to know more about where does our food come from? Is our food healthy? Is it produced safely? Are the animals taken care of? And all those kinds of things. So I think whether it's producers or whether it's consumers, there are a lot of people who are asking questions. And scientists are very well regarded. They do research based on facts and in order to produce solid information to answer the questions that people have. So the Livestock and Forage Center of Excellence is, we provide the resources for researchers. So whether it's land, whether it's animals, we have several different scientific laboratories here at our facility. So university professors and students can come to our center, use these resources in order to answer the questions that people are asking. So whether it's consumers or whether it's producers, we're here to provide the resources in order to help researchers do their job answering questions that people have about livestock and forage production.
Excellent. And that it truly does make sense to have such a great center there that's doing some of this stuff. And I just want to put the call out to people who are watching too. Feel free to put your questions in the comment section. I have a few more questions, and then we'll open it up to the people who are listening in. So Dr. Palmer, this kind of gets into what Lana was saying, that we're trying to do some of this research for the betterment of the cattle industry and kind of advance things. And you are that scientist. You are the professional that's doing a lot of this work and trying to find answers to some of the questions that the industry truly does have. Can you explain some of the research that you're doing right now that will actually have a positive impact for ranchers and cattle producers here in this province and for the rest of the country, for that matter?
Thank you, Clinton. That's a great question. So just to be clear, I am a researcher. My area of interest is reproduction, particularly in cattle. But here at the LFCE, we have a number of other researchers in a broad array of subject matter. What we have is we have a feedlot and a cow-calf operation. For a reproductive specialist, you're mostly going to be focused on the cow-calf side of things. But over in the feedlot, we have a lot of great research going on in disease prevention, study of disease, feeding behavior, nutrition. On the cow-calf side, we have a lot of research on feeding alternatives, overwintering of cows, how to manage grass cattle at pasture. All that even ties into forage type of research. So not just me, we have a wide variety of research here at the LFCE.
And that kind of gets into some of the things that are kind of more front and center, and we definitely hear about it more in the news or see things on social media, and it kind of draws different questions that consumers may have about some of the different production practices and the effects of animal agriculture on the environment, for example. Lana, maybe if you wouldn't mind just kind of highlighting some of that research that is taking place specifically on cattle and then the discussion around climate change. And again, I think it has been in the news quite a bit, and it would be great just to get an overview of some of the stuff that you're doing there, the benefit of not only the ranchers and cattle producers, but consumers in general.
Yes, absolutely. So there are several projects that have happened and continue to happen at the Livestock and Forage Center of Excellence. When you think about doing a science experiment in your class, you always try to eliminate as many variables as possible in order to do really good science. And so one of the really cool things about the new center being located south of Clavet is this land where our feedlot is located used to be used just for crops. And so we have eliminated the variable of other animals being on this property. And so because it's considered a greenfield site is the term that's used. And because of the greenfield site, scientists are able to do some really interesting research. So we have soil scientists, plant scientists, and environmental engineers all looking at the impact of a feedlot on not only the soil, not only what we can see above ground, but also what's under the ground. So they have prior to the feedlot opening, they mapped the groundwater and where it flowed and that kind of thing. And they're monitoring, they've got probes planted all over the place in the feedlot and also in some of the fields. And these probes are doing all sorts of measurements in terms of how is the groundwater changing, if it's changing at all. And there's also probes in those pens where cattle are being fed to see how is the ground underneath those pens also being affected by having a feedlot on this property. So that's one of the really critical research projects that's happening here. Currently, if you in Saskatchewan wanted to either build a feedlot, which is those large pens we saw where animals are fed in the open air, if you wanted to build a feedlot or expand a feedlot, the provincial regulations are also actually based on hog barns, which are very different from cattle living outside. You can imagine that. And so the researchers are trying to figure out what are the appropriate regulations for feedlot operators, either expanding or starting new feedlots, based on science again, not just based on what people think, but based on the actual science. So that's one of the really important research projects that's happening here. The other project, and you saw some of this in the video that we just saw, we have a lot of manure, as you can imagine. We have up to 1,500 animals on the property at any one time, and so they produce a lot of manure. And so the question is when that manure is spread on cropland, how does that manure affect the soil? How does it affect the plant that's growing? And how is it affecting greenhouse gas emissions? You saw that one man, and he had that syringe that he put into that little pot and drew out some gases. They were measuring how much gas was being emitted based on the kind of spread that the manure was used on that particular field. So that's a really interesting project as well. And again, soil scientists are involved in that, as well as plant scientists. So you can see how lots of people are working together. I'm going to tell you about one more project, and then we can answer questions if there's some about this particular area of research. But, you know, cows and calves, they spend many months, not in pens, but out in the field, out in pastures, where they graze all spring and summer and into the fall. And so they're also spreading manure. And so soil scientists and animal scientists are conducting a few different studies related to greenhouse gases. First of all, the greenhouse gases that the cows are breathing off, but also the greenhouse gas that is being emitted from the ground based on that manure and that urine as the animals are moving around the field. And so, you know, one of the scientists explained to me that it's almost like a circle. So they're studying what is the cow eating? And then after what is the cow eating, how does that diet affect the soil as the manure and urine comes out? How does the soil affect the plants that are growing in that pasture? And then finish the circle, how does the plant then affect the cow? And so researchers are looking at different kinds of plants in pastures. And if you feed, you know, these certain plants, then how does that affect the soil? How does that affect greenhouse gases, et cetera? But if you feed a different type of combination of plants, does that then change greenhouse gas emissions, whether it's with the animal breathing it out or whether it's through the manure that's in the soil?
It's really interesting science, and I think something that when people drive by and see cattle grazing in you know, vast kind of pastures or grasslands, they don't necessarily think of some of the interconnected science behind the cattle industry, but it really is. It goes so deep into the crops that are consumed by the cattle and how that cycle of methane and nutrient cycle and everything kind of goes through and cycles back. And I guess this leads me to my next question for Dr. Palmer. We hear again a lot of what's actually being consumed by both humans and animals, but there's a difference between the two in terms of what humans are consuming and then versus what cattle and specific on the beef side are consuming. And maybe just kind of give the viewers a little taste, I guess, if you could, on some of the differences and why a lot of those products that cattle are eating really can't be used for humans?
Yeah, that's a great question, Clinton. One of the unique things about a beef cow, and this is even makes her different from dairy cows or sheep, they're also ruminants, is that she can consume a lot of plants that that we can't eat, or even dairy cows. We have selected beef cows to be able to eat forages and thrive and raise a calf, and of course translate all that material that we can't eat into usable protein for us. And Saskatchewan is a great place to do this. We're a grassland by nature, and we have a lot of fields and lands that aren't really suitable to crop production, and they're great for the cow-calf producer. So this is where our cows really fit into this. And then our research, we're just working with our producers to focus on research that helps them utilize forages and utilize feeds that are available in Saskatchewan more efficiently to help them be better producers, and to help them produce more good quality beef for the consumers out there.
Clinton, if I could just add one thing, one of the scientists that I talked to said it's really all about the bugs and good bugs. So going back to what Dr. Palmer just said about, cattle can eat grasses and forages that we can't consume. And so when when the animal eats eats the forages, there are certain bugs in the first of 4 stomachs in a cow. And those bugs are munching away, that's helping the cow digest the food that it's eaten. And so those are good bugs, but it's the good bugs that are also emitting some of those methane, some of the methane gas and what becomes greenhouse gases. And so, then cattle get this reputation that they're bad for the environment, when in fact they're not bad for the environment. And certainly these bugs are helping them digest food that we wouldn't be able to eat. And then the other end, there's also bugs happening at the back end of the animal in terms of the soil. So the manure and the urine, when it is worked into the soil, the bugs are also feeding on that. And as they feed on that, they're actually providing nutrients for plants to grow. So it's so incredibly interconnected. But again, those bugs, as they munch away in the soil on manure, they're also releasing some of those greenhouse gases that we hear about from time to time.
It is interesting when we start thinking about how everything's kind of interconnected, and even on my own farm, one thing that didn't really have a lot of knowledge when I was growing up was the earthworms, right? The earthworms, a little kind of going through the soil, but now I can see through our farming practices that really helps aerate the soil and decompose some of that organic matter. And it's great to see that the even to the smallest microbe, how these different bugs are helping us with our food system nowadays. Few questions from the audience already have started. First question is, what is that thing behind Dr. Palmer?
I believe that what you're asking about is the Corral Panel. Can you hear me?
Correct. Yeah.
Okay, good. I believe you're asking about the green thing. Yeah, that's a Corral Panel. This is our calving area, so that if we have a cow and a calf that we have to put in overnight to bring them in here. And some of these panels are just sitting to the side here, all ready to go. We're going to start calving here in about a month.
That actually brings up, so you indicated that you're going to start calving in roughly about a month. Have a few questions, and of course I think a lot of people have seen what happened down in Texas and Oklahoma, the snowstorms that have happened. Obviously we're not immune to snow or cold here in Saskatchewan. It's part of our life. So how is it the part of the cattle's or the cows' lives? Like, how do you ensure that they don't get cold and they're cared for, especially when it's winter, and how do you adjust to make sure things like calving can happen when it's maybe a little nicer outside than the cold weather we had a few weeks back?
That's a great question. Lots of folks wonder about what is the best month to calve in. I've often said in Saskatchewan, probably the only great month to calve in would be July. and sometimes it's really too cold there. The LFCE and at most other ranches in Saskatchewan, you like to calve outside if you can. It's keep the cows spread out, and it's better for disease prevention. But because of inclement weather and the risk of inclement weather, we often keep facilities like this. And so next to me, to my left, we have a big yard area with shed.
I think we're losing the cell,
Yeah.
for Dr. Palmer. So maybe Lana, if you want to just continue with just maybe explaining a little bit about, so he was kind of getting into, you had a calving facility that's covered and insulated, but you also have an area just on the other side that you can use.
Right. So when it comes to cows that are calving, it is better if they can calve outside. It's just healthy. They've got fresh air. They'll have more space to move around, all those kinds of things. Whoops, so now we got Colin back again, or maybe not. So if we can calve them out, if the animals can calve outside, great, that's what we do. But there are times, not even just when it's cold weather, but if the wind is really, really bad, a newborn calf comes out wet. And so if there's any chance that that little calf is going to get cold and then have some difficulties in those first few hours of life, we'll bring it into our indoor calving pen to get it warm, dry it off, that kind of thing, or bring them out the cow in as well to lick it off and get it dry and that sort of thing. But I think one of the questions that was asked was actually, don't cows get cold in the winter? And you would think they might, but if you think of, if you've got a dog or a cat, over the fall, they get a heavier fur coat. Cows do the same thing. They get acclimatized to the cold weather. And one of the things that I learned last winter, when it was really, really cold, is if you see a cow and it actually has almost like frost on its back, that on a cold, cold day is an indication that it's a healthy cow and it's actually staying warm. Because what that means is it's not losing its body heat. It's maintaining its body heat within its hide. And so it's actually a positive thing on cold days if a cow has frost on it, as opposed to the other way around.
Awesome. Awesome. So Josh wants to know, how many cows do you actually have on the farm?
We have a lot. So we have two main operations. One side of our facility, we have 1,500 steers primarily, and they will be in smaller pens. A lot of those animals are on feed studies, where scientists are trying to figure out what is the best way to feed animals as they're growing. And then we also have some pens where we have animals, and the veterinarians are looking at diseases. And how do diseases move through a pen of animals? How do they get kind of runny noses like maybe you do when you start school at the beginning of the year? They're also looking at different ways to detect disease earlier in a pen in order to treat animals appropriately with antibiotics. Now, in another month, as Dr. Palmer has said, we will be calving, and we have more than 400 animals that will be calving this year. Some of those are cows that have calved before, and some of those are called first calf heifers, which means this will be their very first calf, and about 400 of those. So when they're all born, we will have 800 animals, hoping that most of those animals are going to have one, and sometimes they'll have twins. We also have bulls, and we have heifers that aren't bred to calve this year, but will be bred to calve next year. So currently, we would have significantly more than 400. In another couple of months, when all those calves are born, we will have significantly more than 800.
Awesome. We have actually quite a few more questions. So if it's all right with both of you, we'll kind of continue this. I know this was scheduled to 1:30, but I think if you guys can have an extra 10 or 15 minutes, we'll try and get through as many of these questions as possible. Shelby asked, there's so much science behind cattle production. is the Livestock and Forage Center of Excellence like a real feedlot? Like you kind of showed some pictures, but is it typical of many of the feedlots here in Western Canada?
Well, it still is a science lab. And so if you recall, I said earlier about the importance of eliminating variables. A real feedlot typically has, the pens will face each other, but we want to eliminate the variable of the weather. So all of our pens face south. They all have fences along the back side of them. Most of our pens are 15 head pens, and that's because those feed studies that are being done are best done with smaller groups of animals, and 15 is apparently been determined as a fairly good number for getting accurate science information based on, is this type of feed better than this type of feed for an animal. However, we do have 4 pens where we can put 200 animals and also subdivide those four pens into 8 100 head pens. Those would be pens that are more similar in size to what you would find in a real feedlot.
We did have a Facebook question that asked why the calves are removed from the mother after birth. And I think this is a great learning explanation between beef and the dairy industry in terms of some of the say beef versus veal. And maybe one of you could answer just the difference between the beef side of things and the dairy side of things.
Colin, if you're back with us, do you want to try that one?
Yeah, I'm back. Yeah, I will. Yeah, it's well, one of the nice things about the beef side of things, and it's great to be a beef producer, mama and baby get to stay together. In fact, we do whatever we can to help with that relationship. And so they stay together till usually quite late in the fall, and when weaning occurs. And usually by that time, mom is happy to have baby move on and go on to bigger and better things. On the dairy side of things, it's quite a different story. Usually mom and baby stay together less than a day, and that's just so that the baby has a chance to get some colostrum. In the dairy, the reality is that mother's milk has to go on to feed us as people, so she goes into usually a freeze-stall situation or a tie-stall situation, and she's milked 2 to 3 times a day. Baby goes off on its own earlier, is raised in a calf rearing facility, gets milk from many moms or even milk replacer. So it's a very, very different type of production setting for sure.
Okay, excellent. Jaden wants to know, what kind of food do the cows actually eat? We talked a little bit about that, but maybe be a little bit more specific so Jaden can understand what they're actually consuming.
Sure. So if we're talking about animals that are in the pasture, it would be a lot of, oh, sorry, go ahead. We're in 2 different locations. This is kind of tricky.
There's a delay going on, but go ahead, Dr. Palmer.
That's fine. Okay, yeah, so cows eat, especially our cows, they eat long-stemmed, what we call forages. And forages are things that you can browse around. You either graze them, so that would be grasses actively growing in the pasture, or that could be stored forages like hay, straw. We also even have silage that's chopped up. This is opposed to grains. We do use some grains, and usually they're feed grade grains. So that's for a lot of Saskatchewan producers. They might not have barley that makes the malting grade. That's able to use it for cattle feed. So we provide an avenue for poorer quality grains, but largely we're feeding forages here.
So we have another more specific on the feeding side, and I think this is probably from one of our ranchers here in this province. When you're kind of switching things up to use minerals, do you prefer to use minerals that are loose or minerals in a tub? And I know down on our ranch, sometimes we use the lick tubs, and sometimes they're kind of added to the ration. And what's the most beneficial for cows calving?
Yeah. So I had a little trouble hearing you. Can you all hear me? Just a thumbs up. So what we feed here, so lick tubs are an interesting way to feed. on my own farm, but they're kind of an expensive way to feed minerals. What we try to do here is we actually mix the minerals into a silage-based ration. That way the cows get a certain amount every day. And so we buy our minerals in a large quantity and feed them that way. And we find it to be a much more cost-effective way to feed minerals than a loose tub situation.
Okay, you're breaking up a little bit there, but I think the take home from that was lick tubs are great, but they're more expensive. And if you can put them into that ration and mix them together, that would probably be the best. We have a question from Carson at the University of Guelph. Are there any research results available to read? And I'll make the assumption this would be on a lot of the research that you're doing at the LFCE, and whether or not there's some place that they can go to read up a little bit more on some of the stuff that's being done.
Absolutely. So Carson, we have a website, lfce.usask.ca, and we post stories on that website regularly, both of research that's being conducted, and when there are results, we'll post stories about that. We also have a section under a research tab that lists more than 24 projects that are ongoing or are nearing completion, but we don't have results yet. So by all means, please go to our website and you'll find lots of really great information about the research that's conducted at the Livestock and Forage Center of Excellence.
I know too, and this is pre-COVID, so it is not going to happen probably this year, but in years in the past, you've had field days out there, and they've been absolutely excellent. I know I've been out there, and my family has gone out there for the events that you've had, and it's great research. And not only that, then you can actually physically talk to a lot of the researchers and the scientists that are out there to ask more of those questions around the forages or the feed stuff that's happening with the cattle. I'm just going to make one last call out if there are any more questions. I think we've gone through everything that I've seen on my list so far. I would like to say that it's such a great opportunity to actually hear from both of you and discuss some of the things that are happening. We do have, and it was just posted in the comments section, the research that you're doing at the LFCE. So if you do want more information, there it is on the bottom of your screen as well. Feel free to take a look at that. I do also want to make a shout out to our own resources too, with farmfoodcaresk.org as well as canadianfoodfocus.org. Great resources and opportunities for you to learn more about agriculture, as well as learn a little bit more about food. We have some resources that not only kind of explain more of how working farms and ranches actually work, but we do have things like recipes and nutritional facts as well. So with that, I want to say thank you so much, Lana and Dr. Palmer, for being a part of this today. It's such a great way to spend Canada's Ag Day talking to experts in this field, and wish you all the best. And thank you to everyone who took the opportunity to be part of this today. So thank you very much and take care.
Thanks for having us. It was great to be with you. Happy Canada Day, Canada's Ag Day.
Thank you. Thank you, Clinton. Thank you, everyone.